Today, we are doing a very special interview with Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel about something every Michigander in our state should be paying attention to. Her office has officially reviewed a fully unredacted data center contract, the one for Van Buren Township. It's the Google project. And she's here to tell us about what she found. She's raising some serious alarms. So why don't we just get into that, and then you and I will chat after.
Attorney General Dana Nessel, welcome. You're sounding the alarm after finally seeing what the public was not able to see in the Selene data centre contract. Walk us through what the unredacted Van Buren Google contract reveals about who gets protected, who gets paid, and who gets left holding the bag.
Yeah, so obviously on the Selene project, I was very upset, as you recall, that there was an ex parte hearing that we weren't involved in, that everything was done behind closed doors with the Michigan Public Service Commission, and that for the first time ever, my department wasn't permitted to see that contract. And again, for the biggest energy project in the history of the state of Michigan. So for the Van Buren site, which is going to be operated by Google, it wasn't the MPSC that said, we want this to be more transparent. And it wasn't DTE, it was Google who said, we don't want to go through what happened last time with Selene Township. So we are going to have a normal process and a contested hearing for the purposes of this project. And this is a project that, again, enormous. At least 1 gigawatt, but it looks like it'll be expanded to bigger than that. So not very far off the size of the Selene project. So we were able to take a look at the contract, and candidly, what we saw was still very concerning. There are a lot of issues that we think vast improvements are going to be required for this project. And some of the things that we were troubled by, the minimum billing fees that had basically a floor of only 80% in terms of covering the monthly costs of the project, which we think should certainly be higher and not only 80%. The termination payments or exit fees. Should Google end this project early because maybe this mode of having a data center like this is outdated, there's more innovations, maybe this facility is no longer profitable to them. Even in the event the company goes out of business, 17 of years of a 20-year contract, it's mandatory that there be additional fees in the event that they close down the facility. Why not all 20 years of a 20-year contract? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Parent company guarantees and the minimum that would have to be paid and the maximum that would have to be paid in the event that something happened to this project. We think the maximum is not nearly high enough. Candidly, we think they should be paying for not just most of the costs of this project. Google should pay for all of the costs of this project.
So are you saying that under this contract, they don't have to pay? So this parent-guardian kind of situation that they have in the contract, does that mean that they don't have to pay all of the expenses attached to that? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that is what I'm saying, which is deeply concerning. This is a $3 trillion company. Many estimates are it's actually the biggest company in the world in terms of profitability and in terms of the amount of money that they hold. I don't know why Michigan ratepayers or Michigan taxpayers should be left holding the bag for any money and why we should have to be subsidizing their costs. But there's more. I would say the cost tracking mechanism was woefully insufficient. And what does that mean? It means that there are all kinds of costs that aren't accounted for that we know are likely to arise, right? Like additional transmission lines to hook up to, say, maybe a new energy source like a solar field or something. For any upgrades that are going to be necessary. There's so many different things that are just not included. And the fact that they're not included means that it's not clear that Google's going to pay for it as opposed to DTE customers having to foot the bill for that. Also, the affordability benefit that you hear about so much, like, oh, this is going to be so great for DTE customers because a lot of this infrastructure is going to be built and then ratepayers will get the benefit. Well, that's not clear to us at all in reading the contract. So again, there are so many different items here that customers, regular customers that are not Google, could be left paying the bill. And again, as I've said many times in regard to these hyperscale centers, there is nothing here that indicates that Google or its parent company, Alphabet, would pay to decommission this plant or this center, this facility, after it's no longer needed anymore. And so we're talking about 200 football fields of concrete and servers and computers and disks and lots of material that my understanding isn't even recyclable. So you're going to have to build new landfills to get rid of this. And who's going to pay for it? Not Google. It's going to be us when this facility is no longer needed anymore. It's like having Packard plants all over the state of Michigan and the state having to foot the bill in order to one day have to, decommission these places.
And I think what we have to remind people of, we've spoken about this a lot over the last 6 months, Dana, is that like every form of technology, like our mobile phones that we use, they started off massive. Computers started off massive, and now we carry them around in our pockets. So there's nothing to say that data centers will not, in some way, shape or form, end up being the same sort of technology where it's like they can put it in a small room as opposed to, football fields.
That's actually part of the business strategy. If you hear, Elon Musk just said this just in the last few days. You heard Jeff Bezos say it. Many of these AI tech billionaires will tell you the business strategy is they don't want these data centers to be around for a full 20 years. They are hoping that they'll eventually end up in space or on the moon or, at least, as you suggested, not being so large scale in size. So their whole business model is that these data centers are not going to be around as long as the contracts. So we know that if we don't have these companies in a place where contractually they are obligated to pay for every single component of these data centers now and in the future, that they're not going to end up paying for it. We are, and that's if they're even still in business. Some of these companies, Google, for instance, we could expect to be around for a long time. They've already been here for a while. But companies like OpenAI, what's to say that when the bubble bursts, that they're still going to be around? They're a very new company. And I should say this, it's not a secret. There's a multi-state investigation into OpenAI for some of their business practices. So, this is a company that could easily go bankrupt very soon. It wouldn't be surprising to me to see people either civilly sued, which that's happening. Some states are actually suing OpenAI, or even criminal prosecutions could result. And these are companies that we're going into business with on behalf of the state of Michigan and our residents. It seems really reckless to me on every level. We have no assurances of any kind that this company is going to be around for many years to come. And of course, the Saline Township deal, is predicated on a contract that's not just over the course of months, not just over the course of years, but over the course of decades. And we know there's going to be an AI bust. And when that occurs, some of these AI companies are going to be put out of business. I don't think it's a stretch to say that OpenAI may be one of them.
What happens to these data centers when the AI companies go out of business?
Well, it could be that the cost of building all the energy infrastructure is borne by us, the ratepayers, that we are paying for the costs of these data centers because they are contractually to be paid for over the course of many, many years. So if you have a company that goes bankrupt and they don't have a parent guarantee by a well-funded company, then all of those costs are not going to be borne by them. They're going to be borne by ratepayers in Michigan and by ultimately likely taxpayers who will have to bail out DTE because they're not going to end up, going out of business. They can't.
Who is winning from these data center developments?
Well, I think that most of these AI companies are going to win no matter what. For sure, who wins every single time? The utilities. So in this case, DTE is going to be a big winner. There's no way for them to lose because remember, they get an automatic rate of return of about 10% no matter what. So there is no such thing as them taking a gamble that doesn't pay off because they automatically get their money one way or the other. It doesn't matter. Um, you know, Look, I think it's a good thing when we get jobs for, our brothers and sisters in the trades. It's good that they, have work for sure. In the event that you have money that's being paid locally, that is helpful, obviously. Although I would indicate that in the Van Buren instance, why did they give them a huge tax break? They're already going to be eligible for this state tax break of 6%. They cut their local taxes in half. Why would you do that for, again, the richest company on planet Earth? It makes no sense to me that you would have to do that to attract them to come to Van Buren. But, so we know who's going to win no matter what. Definitely, again, the trades who get to build the place, they're going to win. The AI companies, they're going to get benefit from it. Definitely the utilities. But for the rest of us in the state of Michigan, they are proposing that by building all this additional energy infrastructure that somehow that's going to benefit us. And I'm not saying it's not possible that that could happen. I'm just saying the guarantees are not in there to assure us that that will occur.
Which is what contracts are supposed to do. So in summary, as written, does this Van Buren data center contract protect Michigan families, or does it protect Google and DTE first?
Yeah, it absolutely protects Google and DTE first, and possibly only them. And so that's why, we filed testimony in this case. We are pushing back, and we are saying there are so many different improvements that need to be made to this contract. And there's so many areas that aren't covered at all. Where we are asking the Michigan Public Service Commission to say, unless you make these amendments to this contract, that you not approve it. And, I guess we're going to see, is the MPSC anything but just a rubber stamp for the utilities and the AI companies? Or are they there to represent us, the people of the state of Michigan? We're going to find out real soon when it comes to this contract. But I fear we already know the answer to that from the Saline Township contract, where again, at any time they could have just opened it up and said, yep, we are absolutely going to grant the AG's request to have, a contested hearing. We're going to hear evidence. We're going to hear from witnesses. We're going to go over this contract with a fine-tooth comb. Instead, they said, nope, this will be done under a shroud of secrecy and in darkness so that the general public will never get to know what's in these contracts. And that makes me fear for the future on the Google Center and then perhaps all the rest after that. I appreciate that Google did not want the bad PR that Oracle and OpenAI got in the Saline Township case. But again, the fact that we can't even get a law passed to say that these contracts can only be approved in a transparent way and that there should be no ex parte hearings. Like that should be the easiest thing ever to get through our state house, Senate, and the governor ought to be pushing for that. And it makes me very concerned that we're not seeing that. We've seen it proposed, but we haven't seen it go anywhere.
So what does all of this make you think now that you've seen the unredacted contract from Google and reflecting back on the completely redacted contract of the Saline data center? How do you reflect on that now? And what does it say about the Saline contract?
I think the Saline contract is probably woefully inadequate to protect ratepayers and also taxpayers in our state in every way imaginable, given the fact that if this Google contract is the one they're going to allow us to see, then can you imagine what's in the contract that we weren't allowed to see? I mean, one can only wonder what kind of provisions are in there that, of course, are great for DTE, and probably great for Oracle and OpenAI, but could be devastating to our state. And there are so many other things that have come up in this time period, right? I mean, we see that the governor of Ohio really panicking because they see that the tax abatement that they had given to data centers there turned out to be much more significant than anyone ever thought. Somewhere in the neighborhood of like 1.5 or 1.6 billion dollars in taxes not paid by the richest companies on planet Earth as a result of bringing in this business. And it's a business that for many people, we're not even so sure that we want it. You know, every day we find out something new about these AI products that they're selling that are, you know, bad for us as consumers and potentially putting a lot of people out of jobs and dangerous in many different ways, including, I would add, dangerous to our democracy. And we're seeing that in the way of all of these AI political videos that are coming out. And many people can't discern what's real and what's not real. But we have so few guardrails in place. It just seems to me such a backwards ass way to do things that I'm hearing people say, well, we'll eventually get those guardrails in place. But these contracts are being signed right now. And the fact of the matter is, once the contract has been signed, once it's been authorized by the Michigan Public Service Commission, it's too late.
Yep.
You can't then retroactively say, by the way, we're going to apply all of these additional conditions to this particular data center when you already signed the contract. And they can say very easily, no, we detrimentally relied on that contract that was rubber stamped by the commission. And as a result, you know, the state is going to be on the hook. So to me, let's get those guardrails in place first, sign the contracts later if we still think that it's a good idea to do so.
So we're talking about slowing everything down, basically taking our time, which we should do. You're the Attorney General of a state of 10 million people live in Michigan. I think there's probably about 9.5 million people that disagree or have questions around data centers. So it's your job to make sure that's all done.
Julie, let me put it this way. So what I've been hearing is, well, we have to do this right away or Michigan is going to miss out on this phenomenal economic opportunity. And these jobs or this money will just go elsewhere. These are exactly the tactics that we see applied in scam situations,
Yes.
right? Where it's these high pressure tactics of like, oh, you got to take this. I'm offering you this great deal on this used car. You either take it now or I got 5 other buyers sitting there and then they're going to take it. So now or never. And that's how it feels to me in terms of these data centers. If it's such a great deal, it's still going to be a great deal in 6 months when we've had an opportunity to really dig deep into these contracts, see what it means, do a great analysis when it comes to other states, and see if is this really a good bargain for Michigan or is it not?
Well, I mean, I think part of this also, Dana, is the fact that they're wanting our water. They're wanting access to our resources. So not every state in America has the resources that we have. And so, therefore, like you said, it's like they're scammers ringing your grandmother and saying, you must take this deal today. Otherwise, you know, five other people will go behind.
Well, and let's say this about the Van Buren Center. I mean, at least in the Saline Township data center, they talked about a closed loop system, which has its own problems. Let's not pretend that that's perfect and there's not going to be any negative environmental consequences of that. But they're not even doing that in Van Buren Township. And so when we talk about what could be 2, 3, 4 million gallons of our water every single day, that ought to be very concerning for people.
I think that will be. I think there's no doubt that will be. So how do you reflect on the celebration of the data centre in Saline with this added context? Obviously, I watched the celebration of the barn. You watched it, I assume. So how do you reflect on that?
Well, you know, first of all, let's say this in regard to myself and the governor. We have different jobs, and we're independently elected office holders. We're allowed to have different viewpoints on different subjects. And the governor's made it clear that she's very interested in economic development, and that maybe she feels as though there's a cost to pay for that or a risk that you have to take, as was said during the course of this, right? Oracle and AI said that this is a gamble, but I don't know if it's a gamble for them so much as it's a gamble for us here in Michigan. But that being the case, you know, her job is economic development. My job is to make sure that ratepayers are protected and that, you know, companies are complying with our environmental laws. and that things are done appropriately. And that could mean a lot of different things. But you know, I watched it and I just had so many different concerns about what it's going to mean for us in the long run. We are talking about what could be generational harms to our state. We could be seeing issues whether it has to do with, a significant increase in the rates that we pay for electricity, significant increase in the number of blackouts or power outages if we're not able to withstand all this additional energy that is required to power these data centers and keep the lights on in our regular businesses and, of course, in our homes. But again, air pollution, light pollution, noise pollution, our water resources. There's so many different ways that this can impact us. And from the standpoint of economic development, let me submit this to you. These definitely provide a lot of jobs in the construction phase. But then remember, in order to get the tax abatement for the state, all that's required is 30 jobs. 30 jobs, which I would submit is about the same as the Coney Island down the street from me. And they don't get any tax abatement, in order to go into business, even if they have delicious Greek salads. But that being the case, what is this going to mean for economic development across the board? And why I say that is because if our rates are so high in order to get, electricity in Michigan, there are going to be all kinds of other businesses that aren't going to be able to afford to stay in the state. And we're certainly not going to be able to attract businesses to come here and say, come to Michigan, where we have the highest rates of energy, in terms of what you're going to pay of any state in the country. That's not a really good strategy, I would think, for economic development. So these new facilities coming here, even if they provide some jobs, will it make up for the jobs that we're going to lose? First of all, lose because of AI to begin with, but then lose because people can't afford to do business in this state.
I want to just come back a bit for a second. You mentioned at the data centre opening in Saline, the opening and the celebration of the barn, Sam Altman came out and said specifically that this is a huge bet. The CEO of Oracle came out and admitted that none of this happens without consequences and we're learning as we go. Reflecting on that, the contract, which was heavily redacted, I submit to you that they're not actually taking the bet. So I don't think Oracle, OpenAI are the ones that are actually taking the bet here. So this is kind of an interesting, they've basically covered themselves by making sure the contract only works in their favour, I suspect. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I think there's no question. Otherwise, why wouldn't they have fought to allow us to see the contract?
Exactly.
To say, hey, nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. Here it all is in black and white. You can be assured that it's only going to be these companies that are on the hook, and it's not going to be DTE, which again, we're going to end up having to pay for because they're too big to fail, because we need to have our energy provider no matter what. It's a big bet for us, not for them, not for the AI companies, not for the utilities. It is Michigan ratepayers and Michigan taxpayers who unwittingly and without our consent are having to be dragged into the bet that they're making.
Where do we see all this sitting right now? How can we fight it? What can we do?
Well, firstly, I think it's so important, again, that we put these guardrails in place first before we're approving any more contracts. And I think, to push our state house, our state senate, and the governor to make sure that we have some of these provisions under the law so that we know what happened in Saline Township can't happen again. Look, this is an incredibly bipartisan issue. You see the numbers on this. You see the people who are deeply concerned, many people who say this is their top issue this election year. And it's across the board. It's Democrats, it's Republicans, it's independents. We should all care about this because it's going to affect each and every one of us. And I think more and more people are learning about that, in large part due to the great work of Distill Social, getting the message out there. But now that people know about the concerns, what are we going to do about it? And so, again, just making these contracts more transparent and ensuring that at least the AG's office, these consumer protection groups, these environmental groups, all the entities that are under the law normally allowed to weigh in and intervene in these cases on any ratepayer increase cases should have a seat at the table so we know that we're represented on all fronts. That's something that we should demand from our legislature and the governor.
So you've mentioned, and I think we all agree, this is a bipartisan issue. The right, left, centre, it doesn't matter. Everyone is very unhappy about these data centres. So why is it that we're seeing our elected officials and candidates on both sides of the aisle, but let's talk specifically about Democrats, being silent on data centres and the impact that it's likely to have on us?
Well, because we have primaries coming up and then the general election after that. And I think that political candidates on both sides of the aisle are terrified because you have literally the most well-resourced actors and political players that we've ever seen in modern history. You have the utilities, who have always been big players in Michigan. You have the trade unions, who are particularly impactful as it pertains to the Democratic Party and whether or not they are going to be supportive or not. And then now you have the AI companies who are spending millions and millions of dollars on political campaigns. So between all three of those, you have candidates for office that are terrified to speak up, and in some instances when they are incumbents, really terrified to move forward with the legislation that we badly need to put these guardrails in place.
Thank you so much, Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel. It's always a pleasure to have you here. Okay, well, that was enlightening, Gina.
Yeah. I mean, my takeaway is holy fuck.
Okay, so let's break it down a little bit because holy fuck certainly makes
No.
that works.
Yeah.
But let's break it down a little bit. I think my biggest I have three big takeaways from this, and the first one I think we should have a really, I think a deep conversation about, and that is Michigan Democrats need to understand something before it's just too late. Voters are angry. They actually are so pissed off at the moment. And unfortunately, we're just not seeing enough pushback either by the legislators, and Dana mentioned this when she spoke to us, the legislators aren't pushing back, and candidates are being bought and paid for, as we know, by corporations, utilities, developers, and tech billionaires.
This is like an easy get for Democrats, and we're just leaving it on the table.
Absolutely.
We could seriously pick up the flag and run with the anti-data center messaging, because we know this is going to pop. Every bubble bursts eventually, and we're going to be holding the bag.
That's exactly right. And that was my next point I wanted to discuss, is that it seems very clear to me after obviously Dana's looked at that contract, after not being able to see everything in the previous contract in Saline, it seems very obvious that we are going to be left holding the bag when it comes to paying any sort of, if they all up and go, we're basically screwed.
Well, and we've seen it before. There's precedent for that. So, I mean, how many empty industrial sites do we have in Michigan just sitting there, decaying, wasting taxpayer dollars?
Over and over again. I thought the other interesting thing that she spoke about, and I've never heard it actually described like this, that we are being scammed by bullies. So much of this is being pushed on the basis that if you don't do it now, another state, Ohio, is going to take them all away from us. I just think that that's very, very interesting, because when you look at it, that's exactly what's happening.
It's just incredible that we're falling for this. I just don't understand. Are we falling for it, or is somebody getting something that we're just unaware of?
No, I think there's just too many people that are bought and paid for, quite honestly. We're not falling for it. I think I think simply it's that's all a cover.
Yeah, it feels like it. It does. So, I do have one final thought.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we saw our governor stand with a bunch of men who, one of them is the known sociopathic liar, Sam Altman. Everyone who's ever worked with him has been vocal and said this about him. And our governor is standing next to him, smiling, handing him, the keys to the state, basically. How do we think this is going to affect other Democrats on the ballot this year?
We want to vote for candidates that stand up against corporate interests and don't take money from them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary elections right now, that's a great way to like look into your candidates, who's taking what money. You can tell right away somebody's values by, who's in their donor inbox. So we urge folks to take a look and see which candidates are taking corporate PAC money in particular, because if they're willing to take these people's money, they're willing to help them in some manner. So it's a quid pro quo in Lansing and in Washington. It's just our backs are the ones not being washed. So with that, guys, I say thank you for tuning in this week. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Substack, all of those favorite places. Julie and I have new tea to be spilled on our G&T Patreon.
So much
if you
this week.
haven't subscribed yet, go to the link tree in any link in any one of our bios on any social media platform, and you will find out how to get onto our Patreon, because that is where we really just the filter goes fully for that one. So
it's been a rough week, so make sure you don't miss it.
It's been a rough week. Julie's gonna start calling people cunts. You're gonna want to be sure to subscribe. So on that note, thank you all for tuning in. Thank you so much, Attorney General Dana Nessel, for just always looking out for the people of Michigan, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of Point of Disorder. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to everyone who listened today. And if you like us, give us a like, a subscribe, or a review on any place you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on social media at Distill Social and at The Guerrilla Politic. This is the Point of Disorder podcast, signing off. Stay sharp, stay progressive, and above all, stay tuned.